Hey, what's up? What's up? Hope you can hear me well. Um, yeah, represent. Yeah, I recorded one for Okongwu and Riller last week, and it freaking deleted on me. But I'm gonna try it again here. I did a pretty solid job in that one, but we'll see how I do here again. But hopefully not too bad, having practiced. Um, Okongwu, Onyeka Okongwu's. I have them. At about 6'10" now. I think there's some, I feel like, disputes about his measurements. I've heard like that he has measured it 9'1", I believe, or no, 7'1". I'm sorry, 7'1" wingspan. He had a measurement in 6'9" in shoes, but I think he may be closer to even 6'10" now. And I feel like his length is longer, like he's longer than the 7'1" wingspan, but he's not super wide shoulders or anything. So maybe his arms seem longer, or maybe he's just capable of playing that way. So I put him at about 6'10" ish in shoes, 7'2" wingspan, 9'1" standing reach. We'll see. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit. Maybe he's a little bit smaller than that. But that's kind of how I feel. We'll be 19.5 years old on July 1st. So usually I start with offensive abilities with these, but with the Okongwu, I feel it would be pertinent to start defensively because his main strength really is, of course, the rim protection. The instincts are legitimately impressive. Just one of the better kind of natural shot blockers in the class, aside even from his size and length and ability to quickly get off the floor, which I suppose you could say also is part of the shot blocking ability. Like you could say that size and ability to get off the floor quickly is a natural shot blocking ability. But I'm talking about like hand placement and kind of instincts and uh, feel for where the ball and timing for the ball as you're blocking and contesting shots in the paint as a help side rotation. So just aggressive contesting, not overly jumpy or foul prone. I mean, all things considered, of course, age and his role and so forth, his volume of blocks that he gets. Obviously, there's going to be some amount of fouls that he gets with that. USC seems more comfortable with him kind of being in the paint and just using him in what is called like a down scheme as defending pick and roll. So that is kind of interesting that um, they do use him in hard hedge and trap situations sometimes in pick and roll, but I feel like most college teams use those types of schemes to defend the pick and roll a lot more than USC does. And I wonder if that's just a USC preference or that's something to do with how they feel about Okongwu's mobility and the ability to move his feet in space. So that is worth noting. I think I've heard some varying kind of analysis of Okongwu's ability to defend in space. I don't think anybody is like really low in saying that he's gonna struggle with mobility in the NBA per se, but I've heard some people that are like really high that he's like a switch big, whereas others are more kind of moderate about it. And I'm not exactly sure where I fall, but I think I'm a little bit closer to the moderate as far as his ability to kind of defend in space and you know um, hard hedge and pick and roll, contain and recover and that sort of thing. And I do wonder if he's better, playing down and kind of, staying in the paint and having, trying to get the defender to drive so he could contest their shot and block their shot as opposed to, getting out into the perimeter and, trying to push the defender away from the rim and trying to force turnovers and force passes out of the pick and roll and stuff like that, and kind of depending more on his speed and quickness as opposed to just his natural shot blocking ability. There's not really a huge amount of plays where he really moves his feet on the perimeter when you watch USC, but there's definitely some. Um, I think at times he could be a little bit tight and not super coordinated, flipping in his hips and kind of changing direction of his like hip angle and foot positioning and stuff. But you'll see him being quite quick in more straight line situations, like recovering to shooters or particularly getting in the passing lanes. He's had some really impressive plays where he'll, you know, um, rotate down into the paint and take away that pass, but then run back out as the skip pass comes. he'll get back out to the weak side shooter and manage to use his length and hand placement and all that to get a steal or deflection. Had some really impressive, you know, um, steals and like passing lanes in the film that I watched in USC. Very good, obviously, awareness and timing as a rim protector, and again, like the hand placement and ability to block shots and contest drives and be in position to protect the rim and to contest is very impressive. But I think his timing and awareness in the passing lanes is very, very good for a big man as well for a five. And of course, when he gets out on the open floor, he's an absolute force. Finishing above the rim so quick. Off the floor, explosive, and really difficult to stop when he's able to get out in space, get downhill and transition. There are some plays sprinkled in where you'll see him switched on wings and smaller guards. I actually thought he did a pretty solid job staying with them, like in straight up like ISO situations. I remember a play against Terrell Terry where he forced a really difficult shot. Terry's not like some amazing one-on-one athlete creator. He didn't have a great amount of isolation possessions last year. He's more of a kind of crafty pick and roll guy and great shooter, but still was fairly impressive to see a Okongwu move his feet against the skilled smaller guard. Um, but yeah, I thought his switching was decent, but not something that I expect him to be like amazing at an NBA. But as far as like his interior defense, I think is definitely incredible. Again, known for that quick jumping. He could just literally wait for a guy to, they always tell you wait until the guy actually shoots and then jump. And that's kind of difficult to do. I think people kind of, the expectations of guys to be able to do that, I think, is a little bit, too much, too high of an expectation at times. But for a Okongwu, he literally does that a lot of the time. And because he's so quick off his feet and has that great kind of hand placement for the ball, and he's often able to get blocks in that sense, or just force a really difficult shot. Changes a lot of shots inside, just you know uh, kind of deters guys from driving in the first place, or forces guys to pass it out or take a really difficult off balance high arcing shot or something like that. So yeah, like defensively, I think he's like legitimately like a dominant defensive player, good defensive IQ as well, relatively for a freshman, mostly under control, fairly smart rotation, disciplined, able to make block shots with his both hands. He's comfortable with his left hand in general. That's something that I don't hear as much about him. I feel like so good job balancing, contain and recover, and pick and roll D as well when he does play more like a hard hedge or kind of a scheme where he's trying to kind of push guys to the baseline and stuff like that. He's able to kind of get out and contain the guy and then time his recovery well and the kind of balance. Not allowing the ball handler driving lane, but also being in position to recover back to the roll man. Um, Good anticipation, recognition for again rotations and just being in the right place to really make make it less likely generally for opposing offenses to get off an efficient shot or score. I think honestly, there's a good argument to make that he was the most individually single most impactful defender in the entire NCAA last year as a freshman, and I think that's very impressive and fairly rare. I think maybe because USC wasn't a great defense as a team, he may not get as much credit for that. And I know some people like Jonah Matthews as a defender, so there might be some like disagreement, like why wasn't their defense better if he's so great. But honestly, I'm not big on Matthews' defense. And I don't think Rakukevich is a very good defender. I don't think Utomi is a particularly good defender. Um, Ethan Anderson is decent, but he's a small freshman point guard, So I really felt like if Okongwu had better defensive talent around him, he could have easily been a part of a really dominant defensive team at the college level. And I do feel like I won't say that he was for sure the best individual defender as far as overall defensive impact last year, but I think you could definitely make an argument for that, and he's definitely would be one of the top contenders for me personally in that. Now, not to say there's no weaknesses on the defensive end. Like I said, first of all, like I don't think he's like a straight up switch big. Like his mobility is solid, but there is some work that he could do with technique, and he's not, super like fluid and super fast, mirroring and kind of containing ball handlers and stuff like that. And again, like if a guy gets comes off a pick and has a congruent space, they are at times able to kind of make a quick move and get around him, or kind of cross him up, or kind of not allowing him, or what's the way to word this? Basically, take advantage of his inability to quickly change direction. I'll say it that way. And then furthermore, I think something that Okongwu has been criticized by some harsher than others is his motor. I don't think his motor is like horrible. I wouldn't say it's like a huge problem, but I think as a big man who's not like an amazing skilled shooter, we'll get to the offense in a bit. I think motor is very important, and I think seeing guys play at a maximum intensity all the time is important. And a Kongwu relative to some of the other bigs like Oscar Shubway, for example, is definitely lacking, I would say. And there are plays, especially earlier in the year, I felt like in the game against Marquette, for example, where he took some plays off and kind of seemed to lose focus and wasn't didn't seem like his head was all the way in the game, like he was playing with maximum again. I won't say effort like physically per se, but as much as kind of mental fortitude, just kind of being really focused and zeroed in to what's going on around him, his head in a swivel, and all that. So there is some of that at times. I'll also say, he'll miss box outs. He'll his strength is a little bit of an issue. Again, as an undersized five man, you would like to see him kind of be able to make up for that, maybe with strength to some degree. But he does get sealed off in the post at times by kind of bulkier interior players. Like I remember somebody like Cody Riley, who's not necessarily a realistic prospect for the NBA even, but a pretty strong interior player, was able to kind of throw Okongwu around a bit and kind of gain pretty favorable interior possession against them. And even bulkier perimeter players at times, as great of a shot blocker as he is, and as great as he is at protecting the rim, they're really strong kind of bully wings and guards at times are able to drive and jump right into his chest and kind of get him off balance and limit his ability to really rise off his feet and to be at his best contesting and able to finish over a Kongwu in that way, by kind of bullying him a bit. So that's a little bit of a concern, and I think that's definitely something that he will improve upon. And I'm sure that he'll be stronger. I mean, almost everybody that's a freshman will get stronger um, when they get to the NBA and as they go through a strength conditioning program in the NBA. And I think his body is pretty good, and I don't think he's like, it's not like a huge problem where he's like Marcus Bingham or somebody like that who has like, serious question about his frame and the ability to gain weight and get significantly stronger. But nevertheless, it's still somewhat of a question, and combined with the fact that he is undersized at the center, and that I don't think the four would be something a position. I mean, I think he could play the four, but he would lose significant value as a player if you were to play him at the four. I feel like so. Yeah, I think he's a five, and he needs to play the five even at the NBA level. But there are definitely some questions about that. Um, uh, we'll go to the offense. Yeah, offensively, I think he's underrated in short roles. I think I posted a couple of videos, and then later I saw Jackson Frank. Shout out to my guy. He, stole my tweets as he tends to do. No, I'm just kidding. No, but he posted on his much more popular and superior Twitter account some of similar clips, I believe, from the same UCLA game where you saw some really impressive short roll passing reads by Okongwu, and then his ability to kind of take a dribble or two, and if you're kind of playing for the pass and move out of the way, you'll see some of the bigs who have some similar kind of in a similar archetype, I'll say, like a Xavier Tillman, for example, when teams are able to play him for the pass and kind of force him to score. He has some struggles at times attacking the rim off the dribble and finishing. Whereas with the Congo, if you let him get downhill, take a dribble and kind of get ahead of steam, he's gonna just dunk on you no matter who you are. I don't care if you're 7'8" and if you're Taco Fall with a 10-foot standing reach, you're gonna get dunked on if you let him get ahead of steam like that. So I do think he's pretty impressive in that sense, like playing him in that short roll situation, and I do think that's kind of a likely role for him. Obviously also as a finisher, just as a straight up roll man, where you use his ability to quickly get off his feet to kind of throw him lobs and stuff like that. But also in short rolls, I think his ability to make some decisions as far as finding shooters if the defense collapses and, quickly seeing cutters and, making fairly accurate, well timed passes. I think he does more than, uh, what's the word? Not capable, but like, um, essentially he passes the threshold of passing ability in that role for being an NBA 5 who is able to pass out of a short role considering he's a 19 and a half year old freshman. I think he's more than good enough as a passer to be able to execute the necessary skill sets within that short role. Um, I'll say on the other hand, there is some questionable decisions like in the post versus like hard double teams. So he'll have some struggles. He won't always have a you know the right pass. He won't always make the right pass against a hard double, and you'll see him get his passes stripped or stolen. Or at other times, he'll try to put it on the floor in the crowd and kind of get stripped or kind of get into his kind of attacking move or whatever you want to call it in the post, kind of his post move, despite there being a double team. So there's been several plays that I watched where a team came over just with a straight up like again hard double team in the post, and he kind of made some really questionable decisions in that. So that was a bit worrisome. But at the same time, again, in the role man situations, he's always been effective and fairly good decision maker. But it is interesting to see if some of those bad decisions from post ups perhaps do affect his decision makings in other ways offensively. I don't think he's going to play in the post too much in the NBA, but I also wouldn't say that I don't want to completely overstate. The lack of post ups in the NBA either. Now, unless you're like Joel Embiid, you probably won't, have a huge amount of post ups run for you. But it's not like the NBA is totally devoid of post ups either. And I do think a guy like Okongwu will still get a decent share of post ups, especially if he is to reach his upside and be an effective player. He should be on the floor enough minutes and, playing high usage enough role where just naturally some of the plays that he's going to be involved in and partake in are going to be post ups. So it is good that he has some fairly good moves in the post up, like I mentioned earlier. He's pretty good with his left hand. He has this weird kind of a hook flip shot, like a quick half hook, kind of just tosses quickly at the basket that he's pretty effective at, and he likes to get into a spin move from either block, and he'll spin back middle and with either hand, again with the right or left. He seems like he doesn't really care. So from the right block, he'll go and he'll do with his left hand, and from the left block, he'll do with his right. And it's not a super efficient shot, and it's not a shot that I would love, to base an NBA offense around or something like that, or even a good college offense, but it's decently effective enough. And, he's a low 70s free throw percentage this year at UCLA. 2 seasons at AAU that I have free throw percentage for him, I believe he was at exactly like 66 out of 99 or something like that, like exactly 2/3 of his free throws made, so 66.7% in AAU. And having that free throw percentage rise, maybe about 6 percentage points in the college level is a little bit more than usual, but I think the average you'll see is like 2.5 to 3% improvement from AU free throw percentage to college. So it's not that unexpected. I wouldn't say that um, his low 70s free throw percentage is above his actual skill. I think it's pretty much in line with how good of a shooter he is, and he definitely shot a decent amount of 17, 18-foot spot ups at USC from like the elbow or right above the free throw line. He had a couple bad misses that I saw on tape where it seemed like the ball came out wrong and he didn't uh, properly execute his shooting mechanics. Kind of had maybe his offhand get in the way a little bit, or like have one of his fingers, you know, kind of tip the ball as he's releasing it a little bit, or something like that. And again, led to some really bad air balls. But for the most part, I feel like he's a fairly capable shooter. Spotting up from 18 feet right now, especially if you leave him open. And the majority of those jump shots he took were ones where the defender was kind of hanging around in the paint and kind of daring him to shoot. So I think he's shown enough ability from that range to be at least optimistic enough to say that in the future he will be able to shoot threes uh, kind of intermittently here and there. You'll see maybe a three per game or something like that from him. If you leave him completely wide open and he gets a good rhythm look, he'll be able to knock it down in spot up situations. I don't expect him to be like a full on pick and pop big. That you could consistently run like plays to set him up for 3-point looks, or really really use him to space the floor to a maximum degree. But I do think he'll be able to hit threes here and there, and I think maybe even in a really optimistic outlook, like if you're really going towards his ceiling outcome, I think there's some kind of Brook Lopez-ish outcomes there where he becomes like a really high level, top of the arc 3-point shooter, kind of spotting up as the last man back in transition and stuff like that offensively. Stuff like that I think is possible, but I think most likely he'll shoot threes here and there when he's wide open, and he'll be decent enough in that sense where you can't like completely like leave him alone and never guard him outside like the immediate basket area. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to be like a huge strength either. And the free throw percentage is also good to the degree that you can't like hack a shack him or anything like that. Good with the left hand, as I said. That flip shot, again, really, really big time lob threat. Really excellent quickness and pop off the ground. Very good offensive rebounder, I think. Probably won't be as much of a feature at the NBA level, but I think will translate into him finishing from the dunker spot and as a roll man, and being able to finish even when he's now like in the kind of open in space and finishing as a dunker, above the rim and stuff like that. He shot 69.9% on 83 putback and pick and roll at rim, like pick and roll man at rim attempts. So it's pretty solid. I wouldn't say it's like amazing elite. Like Toppin, I think is like at 80% or something like that. So 70% is not elite, but it's solid enough to show that he has some touch, and his strength may be a weakness to some degree at the center position, but he has enough power to be able to finish through contact in most cases. His screening definitely needs work, and again, playing physically and with high intensity consistently. If he could, kind of increase his motor, because we have seen in the past that it's not totally impossible to get your motor better, to play with more focus and intensity consistently. We have seen guys improve upon that, at least to some degree. So if he is able to do that, I think would be a big deal for him. And again, the screening I think is something that could definitely improve. And as it improves, I think that will further, of course, help him activate his strength as a lob threat, and kind of what is it called, horizontal gravity or whatever it's called. When you kind of force the defense to collapse because you're such a threat as a roll man. Because he doesn't have the height and kind of length of the DeAndre Jordan types. He maybe not quite as much of kind of what is it called, horizontal or vertical spacer. I forget the term, but I'm sure people listening to this know what I'm talking about. Yeah, he's not exactly the threat of like DeAndre Jordan, but he could get to maybe a step right below that. In that sense, so I think that's definitely useful. The obvious comparison here is Bam Adebayo. That's the one we've heard a lot. John Collins maybe has something in common, at least offensively. Collins probably more skilled shooter. I'm not sure if I'm, especially like in the sense of median outcome as opposed to upside. I don't think Okongwu is likely to get to that level of shooting that Collins has gotten to. But I will say Okongwu is definitely much further along as a jump shooter relative to Bam Adebayo at the same stage. I think the difference where he falls short of somebody like Adebayo is he lacks the flexibility, coordination, and balance. Like Adebayo is like elite switch guy and just so fluid and explosive. I think as far as like pure vertical pop, like ability to get off his feet quickly, there's maybe like him, Okongwu and Adebayo are not that far off, but like as far as like overall fluidity and again like balance, flexibility and stuff like that, I think Bam Adebayo, excuse me, is decently ahead. Like there's a clear difference there, and I think that's definitely very significant. And mobility for centers is very important. I think underrated skill set for fives, especially in the current game. And you see, like, Okongwu just plays more upright. He can't get low. Like, Adebayo could, like, damn near sit down in, a defensive stance, whereas I won't go that far. To be honest, haven't even seen that much Miami this year, so maybe he can like literally sit down in the defensive stance nowadays. But I'm just thinking of what I've seen from Adebayo before. Um, he's definitely more again like kind of flexible and agile and coordinated than relative to Okongwu. And I think that's a pretty important difference where Okongwu does fall short. But I think as far as skill and feel for the game, he's a significant amount ahead of Adebayo. So that is interesting to note. And if you have maybe a slightly less athletic Bam Adebayo, but a Bam Adebayo who could also, hit a three here and there, be more impactful as kind of an interior help defender and kind of have better instincts. Even though Adebayo is a very good defensive player in the NBA level, but he's not like an amazing rim protector. And Adebayo play kind of starts at the floor. You see him play a lot of his minutes with Mayers Leonard on the floor. But some of Miami's most successful and kind of last 5 minutes lineups, Adebayo plays kind of a small ball five. So I think with the Okongwu, it'll probably be something similar. Like considering the way the NBA is as of now, um, I would guess that he would probably start next to like a more pure five, like a 7 foot, 7 foot 1 type of guy. But I think the best lineups and like down the stretch, last 5 minutes of the game, you'll see like a smaller lineup with Okongwu as the five, and then more like a kind of a combo forwardish, skilled, athletic four man. I'm trying to think of an example. I don't know, like Harrison Barnes or somebody like that. Just in this obvious. Reference to the Warriors' death lineup. You could say somebody better, like Kevin Durant or whatever. But yeah, that's kind of the role I see for Okongwu. And it's also worth noting that bigs do improve coordination as they get older. He probably will never be quite at the level of Adebayo, but we have seen consistently guys be capable of become more capable of moving their feet on the perimeter, whether Marquez Bolden or we've seen this year with Nick Richards and Udoka Azubuike. And there's many, many more examples. It's consistently been proven that bigs from their freshman year and really like when they're teenagers are as they progress in their career, they become significantly more coordinated. which is funny because in other ways, bigs tend to not develop as much as like point guards, like as far as offensive skill set and stuff like that. But just as far as defensive mobility, they definitely tend to improve from a young age through their early 20s. And yeah, I think that's about it. I think just would love to get his actual measurements. 7 month wingspan seems a little bit short to me, as I mentioned, but yeah, definitely interested to see how that turns out. And yeah, definitely a big fan of Okongwu, as you might have been able to tell. I think he's a legitimate like high impact defensive player, even in the NBA, despite his size. There is a little bit of a worry again that he'll probably start at the four, but how likely is the team that he goes to to actually play him at the five and build a team that kind of makes it advantageous and um, gives you the capability to play him at the five. Gives you enough size and enough. The type of talent you'll need around him in order to play him at the five consistently, despite being a little bit undersized. If he goes to the right team that's able to put a roster like that together, I think Okongwu will be one of the few players in this class that is able to kind of make a legitimate impact towards winning basketball games at the NBA level. But there is some risk that he just ends up you know being used as like a four man and kind of makes it difficult to you know have good spacing on your team, or it goes to a team that already has a clog of bigs, a glut of bigs on their roster and doesn't quite get the minutes and kind of becomes sort of a middling big man who is highly replaceable in today's NBA. So yeah, there's definitely some questions as there is with any prospect, but overall, I at least have confidence in his again ability to provide an impact in some context in a realistic way, where it's not like just a huge ceiling outcome, one in a million. Like there's like a realistic outcomes, a realistic amount of outcomes that he's able to make a significant impact on winning, which is not something I could say for the majority of prospects in this class. So yeah, that's my Okongwu scouting report. Let me take a breath here. Whew. Like I always say, this is why I wish I had another person with me. Can you guys see me? Yeah, I've been I'm filming a video, so I'm looking at myself on the screen right now. But then I pull up my notes here on the screen, so I can't see the video that I'm filming of myself. I have no idea how I look. I probably look stupid as fuck. But yeah, let me get into Grand Riller. Grand Riller, another guy who's kind of has somewhat interesting measurements, 6'3", maybe 6'6", 6'7" ish wingspan. Probably not. I wouldn't say he has like huge arms, but he has fairly wide shoulders, and I don't think he has like extremely short arms per se. Like decent wingspan. You'll see some pretty good. What are they called? Extension finishes from him. We'll get into it with him. Um, so I'd say I'd venture a guess at about 8'4" standing reach, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you guys, I'm not amazing at guessing wingspan, so maybe I'm missing it and he actually has really long arms or something. I've tried to look for it, but I haven't seen him to have like extreme length. I thought he was like about average, so about a +3, maybe +4 because he has again a pretty wide body, wide chest. And I think like the big thing with him is kind of a quote unquote weakness is he's going to be 23.4, almost 23 and a half years old at the time of the draft. Well, on July 1st, excuse me. We don't know when the draft is actually going to be. Um, the main, of course, kind of appeal with him is like he has like all-time level at rim out of pick and roll and ISO and spot up numbers, just generally at rim for a point guard. But I like to use out of pick and roll ISO spot up to kind of take out the transition and like the cuts and putbacks and stuff like that. So yeah, like his what do I have here? Only player with at least 60 at rim attempts as pick and roll ball handler to shoot 70% in a season in Synergy's history, which goes back to like 06, 07 or something like that. He shot. He's the only one to shoot over 70%, and he shot 82.7% last year, 2018-19. So yeah, just like ridiculous when you combine the volume and the efficiency of getting to and finishing at the rim. The numbers at least are incredible. Has this just ridiculous burst out of crossovers and in and out dribbles. Kind of uses the in and out as a counter because a lot of people, kind of quote unquote know the crossover is coming. So he'll go back to the in and out instead. Just one of the best in the country as far as that pure kind of little motion of crossover into burst first step or whatever you want to call it. Even it's not always his first step technically because a lot of it will be him already dribbling down court like early offense or whatever, and then he'll throw that crossover right in the like 19-20 foot area and we'll just get downhill so fast, like um, you know really powerful and twitchy quick acceleration with the ball. I was looking at the list of like there's like a dozen or so really like bursty, quick first step, just generally fast, smaller guards in the NCAA. I mean, there's some that are like really small, but I try to keep it within somewhat realistic of being NBA prospects. And I haven't watched every NCAA team, so maybe I missed some as well. But honestly, I'd say out of all the names like Saban Lee, then you have Devon Dotson. There's a few out there. I'm sure you guys could think of more. There's one kind of underrated. Jordan Ford has a really quick crossover into first step also, but he's not as strong and is not as explosive vertically as um, Ran Rower. So with Ford, a lot of the times he'll have that movement, he'll get by the initial defense, but then inside he'll kind of settle for a runner or a floater. But yeah, the only guy I'd say honestly you could clearly say has a better first step than Rower is Xavier Johnson. I think Xavier Johnson is the quickest with the ball in the country, at least again from what I've seen. But other than him, I think there's an argument you could make for Saban Lee, or you could make, some would say Dotson is quicker. There's, some back and forth you could say with a few of these guys. Again, I don't remember the names off the top of my head, but if you look through a list of like top point guards, there's a decent amount of these guys that can do that at a really high level. Get to the rim at a really high level and they're really quick. But yeah, I think there's pretty strong argument to make that besides Xavier Johnson, Roller is the quickest first step in the entire country. With that being all said, I think the CAA, Colonial Athletic Association, the conference where he plays, is absolutely atrocious defensively. And I've mentioned this on Twitter several times and just generally have talked about it. So, yeah, in the recent seasons, we've seen guards consistently put up like these ridiculous numbers there and not be able to translate that success against either better competition or in the NBA or in international basketball when they go pro. And, you see somebody like Justin Wright Foreman who's put up pretty good scoring numbers in the G League, but he hasn't exactly like been dominant and he still had some issues with creating efficient looks for himself. When I watched him in the G League and stuff, and in the like combine, I remember he didn't look as kind of quick and athletic and as impressive of self creator as he did, or even in Portsmouth. I think I don't remember. No, I don't think he played Portsmouth. Excuse me, but in the combine, he kind of struggled creating space for himself and stuff like that. Relative to the Colonial again, where first of all you don't have really much size in that league. Most of the centers are like 6'7", 6'8". And just generally, you don't have a lot of great defensive players there, and it's not a league that's really physical and that's really, really high level of kind of physical talent, like as far as length and really high level athleticism. You'll see the best athletes in the league are like the smaller guards that are really quick, like a Riller or Wright Foreman previously. And it is interesting to note that at Hofstra, as after Wright Foreman had this historic self creation numbers as far as scoring and pull up shooting and all of that in the half court. The next season after he left, the Sure Bio stepped into his role and maybe not quite improved in it across the board, but you could argue that he's had a better season than even Ryan Foreman did previously, and definitely has been able to, provide a lot of the same impact that Ryan Foreman did. So just kind of goes to show, and another guy who's having these incredible numbers in the Colonial is Jordan Roland, another kind of smaller 6'2" guard who's putting up these insane shooting numbers. It's interesting. A lot of the bad defense reflects itself in the ability of guys to make pull-ups because teams don't have again as defenders that are as talented physically and that are as physical as kind of as tough and as willing to consistently get into guys and push guys around and kind of hand check and make guys uncomfortable. So you'll see guys put up really impressive pull-up jump shooting numbers because you'll get a lot of pretty easy pull-up jump shots because at least in the paint they'll not let you completely get an easy layup most of the time, but they'll give up pull-up jump shots. So you could get you could make yourself fairly comfortable, I'll say, relative to other conferences in Division One, where you could kind of step in and take your time and kind of get into rhythm and get a pretty good look on pull-up jump shots. So you see some really amazing numbers from I mentioned Wright Foreman, or this year Jordan Rowland on pull-up jump shooting, and other guys as well. So I think that's like one of the main ways that Colonial's bad defense manifests itself. But also for finishing, again, Riller having these all-time numbers, I think is definitely impressive, and he no doubt deserves credit. And I think would be an effective and very high-level finisher in any Division One conference, especially at his age this year. But I do think it's needs to be looked at relative to the defenses that he played against. And in fact, previous to this season now as a senior, where again he's already going to be 23 and a half, so he's basically in the prime of his career period, let alone college. um, so yeah, like this season he's had success against higher level competition, like against some of the high major teams. But in his first 3 years at Charleston, his stats against like high major teams that they played and like really top defensive teams that they played was significantly worse from what I remember relative to the numbers he put up in conference play. It's funny, like this season it's actually the opposite. So some of that is small sample size and like luck plays into it. But I do think watching him play in previous seasons against better athletes and like better defenders generally and more physical guys, bigger guys, he had some struggles because I think it's worth noting that while he is very quick off that crossover and generally I think is a good like run and jump athlete. Even a very good run and jump athlete. I think a big part of his self creation is his body. He loves contact in a good way, I would say. I think he's definitely able to, play through contact and kind of push guys around. But I do wonder a little bit about that bullying against mid-major players. How much of it is it going to translate against NBA guys? Now that he's 23 years old, he's able to even bully high major guys at the college level. But against NBA guys, I'm not sure how much of it is going to fly. Um, I also wonder because of how bad the defense is in Charleston. He played with Sam Miller, who's kind of a spread five, shooting five. I wonder how much he's really going to benefit from NBA spacing because, again, the Colonial defense is so bad that it's kind of artificially provides spacing for the opposing offense. So I'm not sure he'll benefit from NBA spacing the way I could see other point guards like, Cole Anthony is the obvious example, really getting major benefits to their efficiency from, having more space around them. I'm not sure that's the case for Riller. As far as well, I'll say other strength offensively, he not only is he a good finisher, I think his shooting and like kind of what is called three level scoring is kind of underrated. He was 20 out of 47, so a little bit over 40% on runners in the last 2 years combined. That's pretty good. and 44.2 effective field goal percentage on 277 pull-up jump shots in the last 2 years combined. So that's a high volume of attempts. I think a pretty trustworthy number, and 44.2% for a college player, I think is pretty good. And again, a lot of the ways that the Colonials' poor defense manifests is through giving up pull-up jump shots. But nevertheless, I think that's a pretty good number, and I think something that you could be that you could put trust in the Rowers game, that I think he'll be able to do at a decent enough level that it's not like a weakness or something. Teams can just go under on him all the time or whatever. And then also 62.1% effective field goal percentage on 70 spot up jump shots in the last 2 years combined. So that's not a lot of attempts there. He's definitely a guy who likes to put it on the floor, and who likes to dribble and create shots for himself. But he plays a decent amount of two guard actually for Charleston, and even as a two guard, again, he usually will try to put it on the floor and create something himself. But he's, I think, a capable spot up shooter, and I think that number is decently reflective of his true ability as a jump shooter. And I think kind of playing as a three and quote unquote D, we'll get to that, point guard in the NBA, I think he'll be able to, succeed in off ball actions and hopefully be able to be convinced of not having to put the ball on the floor all the time, having much more talent around him and not having to uh, consistently attempt to be the creator of the offense and create for himself and kind of allow others to create for him, and play succeed in a more off-ball role. I think there's some upside for that. I'm not totally ruling that out. So that's fair to be excited about to some degree. Overall, his ability to score not only as a self-creator but also as an off-ball player to some degree. At least as much as it gets for a 6'3" guy. Obviously you don't expect him to be some amazing finisher as far as like cutter or something like that. But again, he is fairly athletic. He's very strong. So for a point guard, I think he is one of the best options. As a cutter or as like an interior finisher of plays that others set up and stuff like that. So I think we could see that a little bit of that, a little bit more of that relative to his current role at Charleston. As far as his shot, like mechanically, I think he kind of has his elbow point out a little bit, so could kind of move the ball away from the middle of his body, which would kind of, I guess, help him get a more um, effective angle, more ideal angle for his elbow as he shoots. More what is called, is this 90 degrees? I'm horrible with degrees. Like people always say, oh, he shoots with his elbow at a 67-degree angle or 34. I have no idea what that means, but you know what I freaking mean. How are you supposed to shoot a basketball? You have to have your elbow straight relatively. You don't want to like this or like this or something. You want to straight relatively. So yeah, I think if he did that a little bit, I think that can help him somewhat. He likes to lean back kind of and fade somewhat on a lot of his shots, even when it's not particularly necessary. So I think at certain times that balance could help him being a little bit more balanced. But I also think a lot of the times he does that to kind of create space and get off a difficult shot over the defense and stuff like that. So I don't mind it as much. I don't think it's like a horrible weakness. And again, it does help him get off and make some pretty difficult shots, be a more kind of effective shot maker. Excuse me. And then the passing, I think something that was a big question for him through a lot of his career, where earlier in his career, his first 2 seasons he had I forget the guy's name, but Charleston had a very good point guard who even played some NBA games of his own since graduating. So yeah, Riller was much more a two guard in his first 2 seasons, and even his first 3 seasons with Charleston. This year, you saw him play more as kind of primary creator, or what is it, primary initiator, excuse me, of the offense. And you definitely saw the improvement with the passing. And even as far as like vision and creativity, you saw some pretty impressive stuff early in the year. Where he'll find like cutters with no looks, like throw bullets, through a crowd of guys right into the hands of a guy wide open for a dunk or something like that. getting really good at obviously getting in the middle of the floor thanks to his quickness and strength and everything. And he'll draw a couple guys and find the shooter on the weak side wing or whatever. He won't make some really impressive skip passes per se, but as far as more like finding cutters on the baseline or back cuts and stuff like that, or finding a big man in the dunker spot after drawing the defense and kind of dumping it off really quickly or throwing like a no look or whatever. He did a pretty good job of that earlier in the year, I thought. And I was kind of surprised watching him in the Colonial that Charleston kind of moved their offense to have their other guards whose names, what's his name? Zeb something? Zeb. What's their point guard's name? I can't remember, but they have these two other point guards. One of whom I thought is a really good player as far as like shooting, but is now like an amazing pure point guard. And the other guy, Zeb or whatever his name is not that good, period. So I don't know why Charleston chose to kind of put the ball in their hands more in conference play and kind of play the Roller as a two guard again. I'm not sure the thinking behind that. I didn't watch all their games, so maybe there is some pattern that their coaching staff saw that made them more comfortable playing Roller off ball more for whatever reason. But yeah, I don't know why they did that. It is worth noting though that maybe there are some reasons that he shouldn't play point guard. I will say one thing that is kind of a legitimate criticism of him as a point guard is his dribble. Still, even now, I saw some of the recent games I saw of his as a senior. He'll have some moments of like really, really poor ball control on his dribble, just really high dribbles, really loose, and where he'll just lose control of the ball without looking at it. And I think that somewhat contributes to his lack of playmaking. Whether just an ability to execute passes because he doesn't have great control of the ball as he's dribbling it, and also because vision as far as he has to look at the ball as he's dribbling to make sure he has good control of it, and therefore misses some of the passes that he could possibly make. And definitely his decision making is generally I won't say like bad, but it's below par for starting point guard at the NBA level. Somebody who you see it's like or like let alone like one of the top 20, top 15 point guards at the NBA level. There's going to be definitely some serious decision making questions there. At least with the way he played at Charleston. Now I'll give him some credit that it's definitely a certain role that he played at Charleston. Again, a really high usage self creator scorer and perhaps he is able to quickly adjust and kind of fit right in into a more off-ball role, play more as a finisher and more as a guy who sets teammates up. There, we've seen in the past some guys be able to do that at least to an extent, but I do wonder about some of the shot selection that he's going to have to definitely cut down on and. Some of the over dribbling, holding the ball for no reason for several seconds. This is an issue for a lot of college players that go to the NBA and are no longer star and high usage guys. That the offense is kind of no longer the focal point of the offense, let's say. So it's somewhat common, but still, nevertheless, I think with Rower, it's even, excuse me, to a higher degree than to a lot of other guys. Hold on, let me get my ring. Where'd it go? Oh, playing this like my daughter's what's called she wears this on her hand. What is it called? Bracelet. So yeah, just fucking around with it a little bit, keeping my hands busy. What does it say? Idle hands is the devil's playground. Um. So yeah, definitely some of tunnel visions. Likes to hold the ball. Um yeah, mental game still needs to catch up with his physical talent, with his body and his quickness. I feel like I didn't talk about the finishing quite enough, and I should just say like he's like really, really an incredible finisher. Like I talked about how maybe his finishing numbers, he's not the best finisher of all time, quite. Let's not go that far, but he is no doubt an excellent finisher. Not only finishing above the rim or over the top of guys, but also having the craft to get around guys, having the strength to take on contact and still finish, finish off balance, understanding angles as a finisher, getting at a good angle on the backboard, putting it in with good touch relatively. So yeah, like really almost all the aspects of finishing, at least to some degree, he's pretty good at. Like there's no like huge weaknesses I would say as a finisher with him, and that's really impressive. And I think that's something that's highly translatable to the NBA level. And even though again that maybe some of the aspects where he really so strong at that mid-major level that won't translate as much to the NBA and will limit him to some degree. I think overall his finishing is a skill that's rare enough and is a skill that's highly projectable to the NBA level, and I think that's important, and I think that makes him a far superior prospect than some of the other kind of guards with similar combination of production and age and stuff like that. Like the kind of broad stroke kind of indicators of success that we usually include to build out our board. Again, the finishing I think is one of those kind of quote unquote special skills. Like there's, yeah, I'll get into philosophy here a little bit for real quick. I'm sorry to go off track a little bit, but yeah, just as far as there's some skills, generally the two things that matter for the two broad main kind of building blocks of what matters in evaluating prospects against each other and building out a big board is production and age. However, obviously, there's things that kind of skew those things either positively or negatively. Like, for example, negatively, you may be undersized at your position, or you may be, let me think, you may be a poor athlete, a guy who's able to succeed at the NCAA level because you're so far ahead skill wise and kind of maybe craft wise and kind of even IQ wise, like you really have already a high level understanding of passes to make and where to be, and you make shots at a high level, but your athleticism is below par. So that's kind of a add-on that you throw on to those two main building blocks, production and age. You add on also, but poor athletes. So then you kind of lower those two, the age and production. Or on the other hand, there's other things that are highly translatable to the NBA. So this guy may be just as productive and the same age as the other guy, but he has, for example, a skill that's really translatable to the NBA is one quick 1 foot jumping in half court, or ability to really quickly get off your feet, in half court drives. The example I often use is Rajon Tucker, who his production at the NCAA level. And he was a somewhat older guy, and his production was like amazing. Like he was a really good scorer, no doubt, but he didn't really have a huge numbers of steals and blocks. He had a pretty bad assist to turnover ratio. Some questions with his free throw percentage and shooting. Like, is he a really high level shooter? But that ability to quickly get off 1 foot and finish above the rim is something that's really translatable to the NBA. Whereas a guy who's more of a craft-based finisher at the NCAA level, or like a strength-based finisher, like somebody like a Jalen Brunson, may not be able to totally translate their finishing to the NBA level. He may be able to translate some of his finishing to the NBA level, but some of it he will no longer be able to use at the NBA level. But Rajon Tucker, all of his finishing will translate to the NBA level because he's so good, getting off the floor quickly, in tight spaces. Yeah, Riller has some of that in that ability to finish quickly, get off 1 foot. That crossover into first step combo is highly translatable as well, and yeah, just that overall ability to get to the rim and finish at the rim off the dribble in the half court is a very translatable skill. So while I think overall Riller may not be super impressive just as far as a 23-and-a-half-year-old mid-major high volume point guard that doesn't who's not a great passer or decision maker, that's usually not a guy I would place even in the top 100 probably. But considering the special skill that's highly translatable that he has, I definitely think it's a fair argument for putting him I'd probably have him somewhere in the middle of the second round, right now. Maybe a little bit higher than that when you consider all the guys that will likely decide to return back to school or return back to their international situation. So excuse me from that for that aside, but I just wanted to quickly explain. Maybe it seems obvious to some, but just kind of the way I approach from a broad strokes outlook, evaluation and kind of prospect ranking. Uh, so yeah, the last thing I'll talk about real quick is just defensively. I didn't say really much about his defense. Um, Still a pretty major defensive liability. Will often lose his man in off-ball D. Really often spaced out ball watching, or even worse, he won't be spaced out, but he'll just be hanging out in no man's land, not really in position to help. On the roll man inside or anything, or on the guy posting up, but also, not really in position to close out on the shooter. Um, and then yeah, like timing and positioning on closeouts can be pretty poor. But I will say to his credit, with his body and quickness, you'd hope there's a little bit more upside there as his usage and offensive load decreases at the next level. Um, but yeah, there's I do worry about his translation without the ball in his hands and against better athletes and defenders. With his age, will he be able to polish the things he needs to work on at this point of his career? And what is his role exactly on a successful NBA team? Are they going to really give him the ball to take advantage of his ability to get to the rim and finish all the time? So there's definitely some concerns there. I know some people are really high on Roller. I'm not quite there. I think he's likely a backup point guard more than a high level starter. But I understand that he has some upside due to his athleticism relative, again, to other point guards that are, have his level of age and production in general. So, yeah, that's my opinion on Roller. Really quickly to rank these two guys. So far, here, let me real quick. Um, I have Okongwu I'd rate number one. Overall, I put him above Halliburton. I talked about Halliburton with his lack of strength and just some of the big kind of downfalls he has as prospect, despite being really impressive in other regards. Riller, I put right below Precious Achua, but I'm thinking if I should move him above Achua. No, I think I'll keep him right below Achua. And here comes my daughter. So I'll see you guys later. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you got something out of that. I'll try to get one up for Anthony Edwards tomorrow. Hopefully, I don't delete this one right now. Let me try to save it.